All right, Charger fans. It feels like it's been so long since I've recorded an episode, but it's only been 6 days. I guess that's how it goes when you have a Thursday night game and you have a mini bye to sit and digest all the Charger news coming out for the past week. So, in this episode, we're going to go through the matchup against Tennessee. The Bolts head to Nashville this weekend to take on the Titans, who are 1-7. In my eyes, this is a no-brainer game. This should not be a trap game. The Chargers should go into Nashville, take care of business, come out 6-3 on the year. But we're going to go through that matchup, talk a little bit about both teams. We are also going to talk about injuries that have accumulated from the Thursday night game. We are also going to talk about some of the trade rumors that are swirling around X right now about who the Chargers may go after. Talk a little bit as well about what players may get traded. And also we'll talk about my predictions for Sunday's game against the Titans. So if you haven't already, be sure to like, subscribe to Electric Edge Podcast on YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also follow me on socials. I am at Electric Edge Pod on X, TikTok, and Instagram. So there's a lot to go through in this episode. But before we do, I have a quick word from one of our newest sponsors, which is PrizePicks. So Bolt fam, if you want to get in on the action during the game, sign up for PrizePicks today. Use code ELECEDGE, ELECEDGE, when you sign up. Play $5 and get $50 worth of picks. The link to sign up is in the description below. Like I mentioned, use code ELECEDGE, ELECEDGE at sign up. So without further ado, let's jump into this episode. All right, so the Chargers are on the road this week, heading to Nashville. Like I mentioned, going to take on the 1-7 Titans, who have just been at the bottom of the league this year as far as offense, as far as defense. So this is a game the Chargers, the way they're playing, and obviously with the players that they do have, should roll in there and get a win. Right now, ESPN has them at a 74% chance of winning. The spread right now is about 9 points. To me, this is a no-brainer game. Go in there, take care of business, get this win. You're at 6-3. You're keeping pace with the Broncos, who have gotten hot, as well as the Chiefs. That division, the AFC West is going to be, I think it's going to come down to the wire. I think this week the Chiefs play Buffalo, which is a huge game. The Chiefs have to go to Buffalo. And then the Broncos take on the Texans. Last week, the Texans played the 49ers and shut them down offensively. So that's going to be another good game to watch. And I think Houston right now is favored 1.5 over the Broncos. I think it's a must-win game for the Chargers. This isn't a trap game. This isn't how some Chargers fans felt about the Giants game. Go into Nashville, take care of business, come out 6-3, and then get ready to play the Steelers back home at SoFi that following Sunday night. So let's jump into some of the stats right now for Tennessee. So Cam Ward was the Titans' first overall pick. He was number one pick in this year's draft. He has not played very well. He has 5 passing touchdowns this year and 6 picks. He's thrown for 1,600 yards. Just that offense is just having a hard time scoring points right now. One of their big playmakers on defense is Jeffrey Simmons, who could potentially not play on Sunday, but we'll get into that once we go into the injury report. I just think the odds are in favor of the Chargers. And if we go through the actual team stats, offensively, the Titans are ranked dead last in the league right now in offense. They're averaging about 248 yards a game, whereas the Chargers are averaging about 378 yards a game. That's a big swing. Defensively, the Titans are giving up about 358 yards a game. And that's pretty in line with what the Chargers are putting up game to game. The Chargers defensively, after last week's game against the Vikings, are giving up about 296 yards a game, so just under 300 yards a game. From a passing standpoint, Tennessee is giving up about 215 yards. But I do want to caveat that the Titans did just trade one of their corners, Roger McCreary, to the Rams. So that could also affect defensive play. This week, like I mentioned, Jeffrey Simmons is questionable to play on Sundays, and that's their best defensive player by any stretch. The Titans, from a run defense standpoint, is giving up about 142 yards a game. So what that tells me is that Kamani Vidal should probably have another 100-yard game against Tennessee. So fingers crossed. The Chargers right now, passing-wise, their pass defense is giving up 184 yards a game, and then their run defense is giving up about 112. So, I mean, the numbers favor towards the Chargers in every aspect. Herbert right now, even after last week's games that finished, he is leading the league in passing yards. And let me pull up actually individual stats. So Herbert's at 2140 as far as passing yards, even with all the other games finishing. He's cooking. I think he's going to have another big game this week against Tennessee, especially with their defense. So let's switch over to PFF grades and let's talk about Tennessee and some keys to the game. So, I mean, as you can see, the Titans are almost dead last in everything. Points scored, they're ranked 34th according to PFF. Points allowed, they're ranked 30th. Overall, they're ranked 28th in the league. Offensively, tied for 29th. Defensively, tied for 24th. And special teams at 13th. And if you look at most of the scores this year for the Titans, they have lost by double digits. Week 1, they only lost by 8 to the Broncos. Week 2, they lost to the Rams 33-19. They lost week 3 to the Colts 41-20. The Texans 26-0. They got their first win against the Cardinals 22-21. Then they lost to the Raiders 20-10. Lost to the Patriots 31-13. And then last week they played the Colts once again and lost 38-14. So the Chargers should win this game on Sunday by 2 scores. Just based on current data, how Tennessee has played this year, this should be a game that the Chargers come in. There's no question about it. They dominate from start to finish. But like I mentioned, the point spread right now is about 9. As far as PFF grades, I mean, on their offensive line, they have some good players. Their guard is ranked 3rd out of 82. No one's really jumping off the board. And like I mentioned, they don't have Jeffrey Simmons in here for their starting lineup. So that is something to keep an eye out on as practice finishes up for this week. Yesterday, and we'll go through this here in a minute, on the injury report, he was questionable to play. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. So that will be a big swing as far as getting pressure on Herbert and stopping that run on Sunday for the Titans. And just to talk about the Chargers real quick after the game process last week. So right now, overall, they're ranked 12th. Offensively, they're tied for 13th. Defense is ranked 10th. Special teams, like I said, has been an issue for us this year. Really haven't seen that explosiveness like we've seen last year from Darius Davis. But not to mention he was hurt for a few games with a knee injury. So this would be a great game to figure those things out and get that special teams firing at a high caliber like it did last year. As far as points scored, the Chargers are ranked 12th. Points allowed, they're ranked 16th. I think this is a no-brainer for a win for the Chargers this week. Offensively, and this is something that we have to keep an eye out on as practice progresses. So last week, Bobby Hart got the start at right tackle for the Chargers. Trey Pipkins was active last week. He's been dealing with a knee injury. But Bobby Hart got in first-team reps with the starting 5 on the offensive line. For what Bobby Hart was coming off the couch, not starting a game since 2021, he has played well for what he is, right? He's not Joe Alt. He's not Rashawn Slater, but he's played well for what he is. But last week's game showed you that Alt is a difference maker on that line. The team I watched Thursday night was a completely different team compared to what I watched Sunday playing the Colts. Just 2 different teams. So that's something to keep an eye out on if Bobby Hart gets the start this week. I also know Mekhi Becton stretched with the team yesterday at practice, and then he had gone inside. That it seems like a recurring trend with Becton that he just can't stay healthy. And he's had a career of not staying healthy. Last year he played with the Eagles. Seemed like a fluke year. He stayed healthy. They won the Super Bowl, comes to the Chargers, signs that $20 million deal, and can't seem to stay on the field. And also his grades have reflected that. I mean, he got a worse grade than Bozen right now, which tells you a lot. But as far as this matchup, I just think the Chargers go into Nashville and they're just going to fire on all cylinders and come out with a win on Sunday. I hope that's the case. And if I'm wrong, then this team is a pretender. You should not go into Nashville against a 1-7 team and lose. Some things, though, I'd like to see in this game. I want to see the red zone offense figure it out. Last week they had no problem scoring. They got to the red zone. They ran the ball in. They threw the ball. I want to see more of that this week. Really build upon that. Get things firing for when we go into the stretch of really hard teams. Like I mentioned, we're going to play Pittsburgh, we're going to play Jacksonville, we're going to play the Chiefs again, we're going to play the Broncos. There is a gauntlet of teams that we have to play. So let's figure out these things now. So when we get to those second round division games, this offense is going to fire on all cylinders and not settle for field goals. The other thing I like to see is the defense build on what they did Thursday night, right? They shut down the run game. The run game for the Vikings was non-existent. You have Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears for the Titans, shut them down, put all the pressure on Cam Ward. He has not played well this year, and you're going to have a similar result like you did Thursday night against the Vikings. I'd like to see another clean game from the Chargers. They had minimal penalties against the Vikings. Let's do the same thing. Force the Titans to make penalties and be undisciplined. We're also going to have to keep a lookout in the secondary. Like I mentioned, I'll go through the injury report here in a few, but Derwin James got injured against the Vikings. Tarheeb Still is going to be out for a couple weeks with the MCL sprain. That means guys like RJ Mickens are going to have to step up. Nico Reed, who was one of those preseason heroes, he's going to get his chance to start in this defense. So it's going to be next man up in this secondary. I think St. Juste and Jackson and Cam Hart have played very well. Someone like Jasir Taylor, who's exclusively played on special teams this year, is going to have to step up if some of these guys are inactive for Sunday. I think Derwin James is going to play Sunday. Tarheeb Still is going to be out at least probably 2 weeks with an MCL sprain. But as Harbaugh says, next man up. So we'll see what these younger guys can bring to the table on Sunday because they will get their shot to play. All right, since I've mentioned it a million times already, let's go through this injury report. So this is from Wednesday at practice. Thursday's injury report has not come out yet. But Mekhi Becton, like I mentioned, he stretched with the team, left. Austin Deculus was limited. So it'll be interesting to see who is going to be that backup. Probably Foster Sorrell. Disley did not practice, but Disley was an active and healthy scratch last week. And I'm going to bring him up here in a few. Hassan Haskins, once again, didn't practice. Derwin James was limited, but he did practice. Tony Jefferson has a hamstring issue. Dean Leonard, he was limited, but he's coming off the IR, so we may get him back. Don't know if we're going to get him back this week or next week against the Steelers. Ladd McConkey was limited. John Marie Salyer was limited with a knee injury. Tarheeb Still did not practice. Like I mentioned, MCL sprain, going to be out a few weeks. And then Kendall Williamson was also limited. And then Daniel Popper shared this yesterday. I just want to touch on Tennessee's injury report. So they have just as many injuries as we do. Some key players for them, their tackle Dan Moore didn't practice with a shoulder injury. Tight end Okonkwo was limited with a foot injury. Tony Pollard was limited with a neck injury. Calvin Ridley, who's their number one wide receiver, didn't practice with a hamstring. Like I mentioned, Jeffrey Simmons didn't practice with a hamstring. And then one of their guards, he was just on rest. But watch for Pollard, Ridley, Simmons, Dan Moore. If those guys are out, that's even more of an advantage for the Chargers on Sunday. All right, some other roster moves that were made. The Chargers on Tuesday signed defensive lineman Kyle Pico, who is from that tree of Titans defensive players that Joe Ortiz loves to find and sign. And they signed safety Marcus Williams to the practice squad. They released Luke Grimm and Naheem Hines from the practice squad. I think, though, at some point they'll probably resign Hines since he's one of those guys where he's special teams and on the offense. But those are the roster moves so far this week. Right now, as it sits, the Chargers are ranked 6th in the AFC. If they lose against Tennessee, their playoff chances drop to 53%. If the Chargers win, they go up to 74%. Right now, they're sitting at 68%. You got to win the games you're supposed to win. We should not have lost that game to the Giants. We probably shouldn't have lost that game to Washington either. But regardless, the Chargers can control their own destiny by winning week after week, and it starts this week against the Titans. Some other stats I want to touch on before we go into trade rumors. So teams with the best third down conversion percentage this year. The Chargers are ranked first in the NFL. They are almost converting at 50% of their third downs. So they're at 48.7. Some of the other teams in this category, the Packers are at 48.3%, the 49ers are at 46.4%, the Colts at 45.3%, and the Cardinals at 44.8%. I will say, watching Chargers games, that when it is third down, I have this feeling that, all right, the Herbert's going to make that throw to get 8 or 9 yards, or they're going to run the ball for that 1 yard they need. I actually feel very confident when it's third down for the Chargers. So that number reflects my confidence in this team and that they actually are converting on third down. And then teams with the worst percentage. Number one is the Titans, right? Get them in third and long. They're at 29.9%. It's going to be tough for Cam Ward and the Titans to convert. Here's another stat I had found preparing for the show this week. We all know the offensive line issues that the Chargers have had this year, especially with Alt not being around for 4 games. So Justin Herbert's been blitzed 112 times, which is the most in the NFL. He's been pressured 148 times, which is the most in the NFL. He's pressured on 43.5% of dropbacks, which is second most. And he's been sacked 22 times, which is the fourth most. So I don't want to hear that Herbert isn't clutch or all the other nonsense that's put out on social media about how he's not an elite quarterback. I think that if this was most quarterbacks in the NFL, they'd have a losing record. And then one other note I want to make, this just came out today, that the Chargers will be wearing their Superchargers uniforms once again against the Texans, which is a home game in December, and that is week 17. So I cannot wait to rock Supercharger look once again. I think they also wear them against the Raiders, and that's a home game at the end of November. So we're going to get 3 games this year with the Supercharger jerseys, which is pretty awesome. So before I get on to my picks, I do want to touch on the trade rumors. Trade deadline is November 4th. I think the Chargers are going to make some moves. I think they have to, especially with this team has a winning record. They do have a chance to win the division. It's going to be tough, but they have a chance. I think 1 or 2 moves may move that needle a little bit more in their favor. So I think there's opportunity there for the Chargers to go out before next week and make some news. So there's a couple pieces I had found, like I said, preparing for this show on ESPN that I did want to touch on and that were pretty interesting based on other news I had or other stats that I had gone through. So the Chargers, the talk has been getting another running back until Hampton gets back, finding some type of offensive lineman to help with the pressure issues they've had this year. Then also maybe looking for a safety with the injuries of Derwin James and Tony Jefferson. But like I mentioned, I think Derwin James plays this week, so that's probably lower on their priority list. However, this was from ESPN.com, and I'll pull this up. Okay, so talks about positions of need, which we know, right? But I wanted to touch on this, who could be on the move. So they bring up Will Dissly. So the Chargers signed him ahead of 2024. He's been more of that blocking tight end. But they drafted Gatson, who's been playing phenomenal. He's number 1 tight end right now. They also have Tyler Conklin and Tucker Fisk. Also, I took a look at yesterday what the cap hits are looking like. And Will Dissly's up there, right? So Will Dissly has a $5.8 million cap hit for the Chargers. In order to make moves, you got to adjust some money. So it is a very interesting one. I just don't know what teams would want him. Like I said, it was a healthy scratch against the Vikings. But it was interesting to have him as a potential piece to move. I just don't know if it's going to happen. But I liked this piece where it talks about who could be targeted. So they talk about center Ethan Posick from the Browns. So I had wanted to look up how good Ethan Posick is. So I pulled up his PFF stats, right? And this year he's ranked 23rd out of 33 centers. Bradley Bozeman is ranked dead last, right? So that's an improvement right there. I mean, the improvement on the offensive line. They talked about moving in that article, moving Bradley Bozeman over to left guard for Zion Johnson. I don't think you move Zion. Zion has played pretty well for the season. I think you may move him into Becton's spot because Becton seems to always be hurt, but the Chargers aren't going to do that because they owe him a ton of money. But this was an interesting move. I think the Browns could definitely be a potential trade partner. They're in another losing season. They're probably looking for some draft capital to rebuild. So it wouldn't hurt calling the Browns and seeing what offensive linemen are available. It's just tough during the season. You never see top quality offensive linemen get moved. So I don't know what Ortiz is going to do. I don't know what calls he can make, but if we can get an offensive lineman, great. I just don't see it being anyone of high caliber during the season. Running backs, though, there's talk of Breece Hall. I would love to see Breece Hall have that 1-2 tandem of Hall and Hampton. Hall's still a young guy. Yeah, he did have an ACL injury, but he's just on a bad team with the Jets right now. The Jets just can't do anything right. So I'd love to see it. I just don't know how much Ortiz is going to give up as far as draft capital or players to get him. But anything can happen. Let's hope that there is a push to get some higher talent in the room, especially on the offensive side of the ball, whether it's offensive line, adding an additional running back. But we'll see what happens. I think the most likely scenario is they run with Vidal and then they look for a lower caliber running back to kind of until Hampton gets back. Stories that was, or one of the players that was tied to the Chargers a couple weeks ago was Jalen Wright, who's sitting and rotting on the Dolphins bench, and he was one of their draft picks in the 2024 draft. So we'll see what happens. Got a few days before the trade deadline. I'm sure things will heat up as that approaches. Okay, let's talk about my predictions for the game. So I go back to my initial video, my first video I ever did on the podcast, talking about my predictions for the year. I had the Chargers winning this game 27-20. I don't think the Titans are scoring 20 points. It's more going to be like 27. So I'm going to run with that score, 27-13 Chargers. They moved to 6-3. I believe they moved to 5-1 in the AFC as well, which is great. But they got to go down. They got to go to Nashville, take care of business, get back on the plane, and get ready for a tough opponent next week against the Steelers. So with that being said, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Electric Edge Podcast on YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow me on socials at Electric Edge Pod. I'm on X, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram. And Charger fans, let me know your predictions for Sunday's game in the comments below. As always, love to read Charger fans' comments, your predictions. I try to reply to every single one I can, so they're always. Hope you enjoyed another episode of the Electric Edge Podcast. Go Chargers and bolt up.